Hi, I'm Laura. Thank you for joining me for another episode of Shakespeare's Aura. I am Dipsy and this is Miss Shakespeare.
Hello.
And hi, how you doing?
Not too bad, thank you. Looking forward to another session.
Yeah.
Bit of discussion.
Yeah.
Something interesting.
Well, I was going to ask you how you view yourself. Do you see yourself as a Black British or of Afro-Caribbean descent, or like how when you get your form from the government and you have to fill it in, what are you? What do you see yourself as?
Well, I think it's a more complex question than I would have previously thought, because I mean, before I would have been quite adamant that I'm Black and not so sure about the British, and that that I identify myself as Black because this country, Britain, I was born here, I've lived here all my life, but I get the distinct impression sometimes that I'm not wanted, or appreciated in this country. And I've had that growing up, and because of that, I think I rejected the idea of the Britishness. I felt like the Britishness was just circumstantial. So I'm British because I was born here, basically, but it's not a culture thing. My culture was most certainly and most definitely Black. However, when you've just mentioned the form there, I know that I don't know if it's national, but in Kirklees or some of Kirklees forms, there is no actual option for Black British
at all.
No, well, in some forms there's not,
right.
And it's like you look on the form itself, and I think there's Black Caribbean or Black African
or Black other,
right. But not Black British. And I think it was when I came across those options that I did think, but wait a minute, I'm Black British. None of those options seemed to apply to me, because I suppose that's when I first felt that my identity was, maybe there was part of my culture that was British and is British, and I don't think you can kind of avoid that growing up in Britain. I've watched, EastEnders, Coronation Street, I drink tea, things like that, fish and chips,
right.
And there's things that are inherent to me that you would describe as being British culture. So that separates me from, maybe, for instance, a Jamaican who was to come over here maybe a year ago. We would have less in common in some ways than myself and a white British person.
Yeah.
And then in other ways I'd have more in common with him than a white. So there's crossovers.
Yeah.
But because of that, I think that, I am Black British. I'm Black and I am also British.
Right.
To describe myself as Black Caribbean kind of, well, it ignores the British part completely, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I see myself as, Black British, right? When I went to Jamaica in 2012, it was painfully obvious that I was British.
Yeah.
I wasn't viewed as, and I wasn't accepted as a Jamaican.
Absolutely, yeah.
I don't speak the language, and, Black British. I'm British, and I just happen to be Black.
Yeah.
I would like to be able to go home or be able to call somewhere home, but I don't actually think that I can, really. I was once talking to a girl who was born over here and she was raised in Nigeria, and then she came back, and I'd said some kind of joke or said something that anybody who had been here in the 80s would have got, and she was like, it just went over her head, and it's like, wow, absolutely. There is such a difference. And that kind of comes into what you were saying just before as well, that you are Black, that there are so many different cultures within being Black as well.
That's true, yeah.
We have got so many different divides.
Yeah, we do. And just like with the Black British, I mean, just like you were saying that things would have gone over this girl's head, and that is a thing. I mean, I think once when I was looking back at our Lovers Rock period in Britain, and the vast majority of those singers, Lovers Rock singers, were British, and they were Black British, and so that whole genre is very distinctly black British.
Yeah.
You know, and yet they were, you know, their parents were probably Jamaican, a lot of them, or they may have been born in Jamaica and came here, but they were British.
Yeah.
You know, the vast majority of them, and so we do have things that are most certainly distinctly black British, but still, I think where sometimes it comes for me is when I look at the country as a whole, and we're 2% or less.
Yeah.
Ethnic minorities, I think, are 2%. We're as black people are going to be less than that. And when I see, for instance, our representation on the TV and things like that, it stops it feeling as much like home as I'm sure a white person would like. A white person in this country, it's completely home to them.
Of course, yeah.
Whereas for me, this is home, but as I said before, it's when you're at home with family who don't necessarily all want you to be there.
Yeah.
And so that, to me, that is the bit where I can't completely and utterly accept this country as my own. I guess because I feel like, is it my own? Or am I displaced? Am I just here as a result of a set of circumstances rather than it being inherently mine, you know?
Okay.
Yeah, so I don't necessarily feel British all the time in that respect.
Because it's funny, isn't it? Because I get the impression that Americans, black Americans, see themselves as American.
Yeah.
And they're quite proud of the fact,
Absolutely.
and they kind of stand up strong in that, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that's a big difference between us and them.
I think it is, and I think it's just a massive difference. I think even with the racism that goes on in America, which is probably a lot more, well, no, it is a lot more extreme than here. I think even in face of that, they see themselves as American. But then I think that can be explained in terms of the amount of generations that have been in America. Because remember, we came over majority in Windrush era, so that was like what, the 50s.
Yeah.
Americans have been there for generations and generations. We're talking centuries.
Yeah.
You know, they were there through slavery.
Yeah.
So even during slavery, a lot of them were like, say, third generation American.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
So it's like they've been there for a really long time. I don't know if you remember Roots. But in Roots, when Kinta Conte comes to America, the Americans called him like the African.
Yeah. Yeah.
The black slaves, because they've been in America so long, they look at him as other.
Yeah.
So they've been there that long that you can kind of see how it's kind of gotten into their blood. Whereas I think we've been here less time, and maybe that period where we had to establish ourselves and build up our own kind of identity within Britain was a bit short-lived as well. You know, we had the real McCoy, we had our own, and it kind of died away a bit.
Yeah.
Although I do think that now the generation under us are a bit different in that I think they see themselves as British, and I think that the way they mix and everything is a lot different. And I think that a lot of those kids coming, like my son, I think he'll see himself as completely British. I doubt he'll have those same kind of qualms.
My children see themselves as British.
Yeah.
They don't identify with Jamaica at all.
Yeah.
And an example of that was when the Olympics was on. My daughter was like, yeah, Britain. And I was like, what? Come on, it's Jamaica. Yeah. But then she turned around and said, well, I haven't been. So I suppose maybe that's, you know, what's it called on my part. But then at the same time, it's like, well, I don't have anywhere to go in Jamaica, so how can I take you anyway, you know?
Yeah. But it is that. Now I've got a friend who, as well, when Britain was out, she then turned her allegiance to Greece, and I was like, but you know, for me, it's whatever black country is in the Olympics or in the football. That's who I'm supporting.
Okay, but she was of Greek heritage, yeah?
No. Actually, not the Olympics. This was the football,
right?
The World Cup. So yeah, when Britain went out, she supported Greece. But it's like, for me, it would be just whoever is black. But then again, I do think that's a generation gap. She's younger than me, and I think that is maybe the point, is that the generation I came from in London, I mean, even where I grew up, it was basically all black.
Yeah.
And so there wasn't actually a lot of white people. I didn't grow up in the same mix as a lot of black people growing up today are doing, you know. We were at my school, there were a few white girls or boys who you could name, because there were just a few of them.
Right.
And in the estate where I grew up, it was the same. So I grew up very black.
Whereas I grew up on a racist estate. I grew up in a National Front area. Our family was like the second black family in the estate to move in. So it's like complete contrast to
it is, but then because of that, did that make you like ultra aware of your blackness and you pulled together with it, or did it make you not want? Was there a resentment against being black because you were getting all this?
Right. The only resentment that I had against myself was for my hair.
Yeah.
You know, that was the only. I never ever looked at myself as different or, you know, resented the fact that I was black.
Mm.
I've always been really proud and really happy. I'm so glad that I'm black, and I'm so glad that my roots are of, you know, from Jamaican descent. But I grew up around white people all my life, and I think maybe that was also to do with the religion, because I was brought up as a Jehovah's Witness. So I think, you know, but it's funny because from black girls, from a black girl in particular, I was told, you ain't black enough, you ain't got the bum, you ain't got the lips.
I've been told that, yeah.
Right, and it's funny, it came from a black person, but I was never called anything, I was never slagged off for being black by a white person.
Yeah, and I think that's to do with our identity and a lot of things. I got that at school because I was a reader, and I always had a book, and that's what one girl said to me once, you know, you act white. And ironically, I was reading a Malcolm X book at the time, and that's all the stuff I really read was, you know, a lot of black American literature. And so it was ironic that she was saying I wasn't black because I was reading, when what I was reading was, you know, but I think it's been given to us, that kind of way of stereotyping each other, so that, you know, you're black if you do these type of things and act this way, but you're not so black if you do this, you know. And, you know, that's unfortunate, but I think that's also where my identity has gone a bit, because you find yourself sometimes thinking, well, if black people are going to be the ones to give you all the stick for not being black enough, then I'll move the other. And I think that's why a lot of intellectual black people have a lot of white friends and disassociate themselves completely from black people, because I think sometimes they get a lot of crap from black people, and so that's what they do. And I think it's unfortunate, because then it I suppose we end up segregating, and you've got certain types of black people in this corner, with white people, and, you know, certain types of black people who are black in another corner.
It's funny you should say that, because the other day I was in a shopping centre, a shop, grocers. Flipping heck, I was in Tesco. No, let's not even say Tesco. I wasn't even in Tesco. The thing is, I went to Tesco the other day and I was disgusted. I was like, this place is like, I was going to say Beirut, but I can't say that. But yeah, Tesco, forget that. I'll tell the truth. I was in Aldi, right?
Yeah.
Now, so I was walking down the aisles, right? And you know, I'm new to there, right? So I was walking down the aisles with my partner, and I was like, we were talking about black role models, right? And then I come across the source that Ainsley Harriot's doing.
Oh, is he? Yeah, he does a few sources. Which source was this?
Yeah. He's a role model, surely.
Which source was it that he was doing?
I don't know.
Just the source.
I didn't even look.
Okay. Yeah.
But it's like Ainsley Harriot. He's a black man.
That's a very good example.
Yeah, we forget he's a black man.
It is a very good example. It is, because Ainsley Harriot is a black man,
and he's achieved a hell of a lot.
And he has. And I remember, you know, being very not happy with Ainsley Harriot for a very long time, because he doesn't act black.
Right.
He acts white. And this is the thing, because, I mean, it reminds me of the whole Bruno thing, and the way that Bruno wasn't appreciated for a very long time in his career by black people.
Yeah.
And I was one of those people who didn't appreciate him at all. And then me and my mum were watching an interview on Real McCoy with him.
Okay.
And he was on there with the other comedians, and he was sat there and he was like, it really hurts. It really hurts when...
Really?
Yes, it really hurts when you know, black people have done this to me and said that I don't act black and blah, blah, blah. And you could tell that he was telling the truth, that it did really hurt. And he actually had a jibe at one of the comedians. It was actually Gina Ashray. And he was like, you know, I remember when you said this about... He was good-natured about it. And, you know, the comedians were like nudging to it wasn't me type thing.
Right.
That said it. You know, but
so black.
It was the first time we actually got to think of it from the person's point of view.
Yeah.
That, you know, he's a black man, he's achieved a lot.
Yeah.
And whilst the white people in this country are you know, celebrating him, his own people are denying him and saying basically, no, we have no time for you because you're just not black enough. And, you know, I did have to rethink my stance on that, and I did rethink it, and, you know, you know, and I suppose I've never really rethought it with Ainsley Harriott, but it is pretty much the same. It's the same thing. I think sometimes that kind of thing comes out of the struggle, and at times of struggle, when you've got these people who seem to fit in so much with white people, it can be difficult. I suppose not so much with Ainsley Harriott, but certainly with Bruno. At the time when he was most popular was at a time when, you know, black men were being stopped and searched. There was a lot going on for black people, and I think they would have appreciated more someone who was more blatantly on their side, I suppose, or coming from where they come from. Whereas his very nature, he was able to mix with anyone, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think sometimes you can't see it completely one way. There's reasons sometimes why black people do that. But it has to be acknowledged, I suppose, when it is done, because there's a lot of hurt and pain that can go into that type of thing.
I think a lot of it as well is down to education, because I'm aware that he grew up in a boarding school, so he would have been mixing with maybe not necessarily black people.
I think he would have. I think he would have grown up with, and I mean, some people as well. They just, it seemed like when we were at school, you always had black people who assimilated with white people just easier than they did.
Because I did. Due to my religion.
You just always did, and I think it's just that thing of knowing where the other side is coming on. I think it's, as I said, I think it's a bit less. That would be a bit less now, and I think that's a good thing, you know. And I think, as I said, that then it would have been more of a thing of, I suppose that's the thing, he would have seen himself as black British even back then, whereas a lot of people didn't, because they knew that they weren't wanted, and they were being very much treated like they weren't wanted, and so it's like, we're black, but F Britain type thing. And so someone who embraced British culture so much would have been
So should we be doing that then? If someone was to say to you, go back to your own country, where are you going?
Well, exactly, and I think that's the thing now. I think it's way past that now. And I actually think that these countries, I don't think that they are in our best interests personally. I just don't think that we're at a point where we can do that anymore, because our countries have been destroyed, you know, by the powers that be. I think there's all different reasons, and I think it sounds reductive, but even the weather, down to the weather, it's not our country, and it feeds into so many other things, you know, depression, so many other things our health that can be wrong with us, and it could be the reasons why we don't excel in these type of countries, because they're not built for us.
We are all vitamin D deficient, you know, and that affects so much, you know. It's a deficiency, and it's not just vitamin D. There's loads of things that we should be getting from the sun, and we're not.
Exactly, but that goes back to the British thing, because I feel like if we were really valued in this country, and the fact that I know actually a lot of people who have gone to their doctors and said, you know, they've said you're vitamin D deficient. So they know that now. So why isn't there something saying, okay, you know what, maybe black people need to get these vitamins from an early age. Maybe we should be giving them this, because we know that they are deficient in it. We know that they're in a country where they're not getting something that their bodies actually need. You know, another thing is that I've realised that a lot of black women have thyroids. You know, I can't even name the amount of women personally that I've come across who have it. I have thyroids, but it was when I was pregnant, I was told that it wasn't something that was actually interfering with me. It didn't seem, but a hell of a lot of black women seem to have it. Again, where's the research? Where's the data to say this is something that's affecting? I mean, we know that there shouldn't really be a problem with our fertility, black women in general, you know, with our lineage and all of that. So why is this such an issue? And where's the research to say why are so many black women? But then that comes back to the thing, are we British? You know, if this was a thing with just white women, would there be this research available? Would they be doing something about it? Exactly.
It would just be natural and normal, wouldn't it?
And I think that's the point, is that we're British, but because we're not completely British in the same sense as a white British person, sometimes I wonder if we're doing ourselves a disservice in not separating ourselves to the degree that we at least have a community that can work for us and our interests. For instance, like the Asians, who, although they might be British, ensure that they have a community that's working in their interests. So, for instance, this vitamin D business and this thyroid business, if we had a community that was working in our interests, we might have people, community leaders, who are raising these things to the powers that... Do you know what I mean?
I know. Okay, so if you check it, right, we've got so many black people, right, in England alone. Okay, so many of them are doctors, nurses. You know, there are lawyers. There are black people in every single sector.
Absolutely.
Right. We have, you know, the head knowledge. Enough. What do you mean enough? More than enough. We created so much. We have invented so much. If we were able to all work together.
Exactly. And that's not about segregation. It's about having to look at what's in our best interest so that we can thrive.
Yeah, but divide and conquer. Divide and conquer.
Exactly.
Divide and conquer started it. But I think we carried it on.
Yeah, well, I think it's an ideology, and I think ideology is a very, very powerful thing. And the whole thing of slavery was to break us mentally.
Yeah.
And once you're broken, it's just not so easy to put your psyche back together, especially a psyche, a race psyche, not just individual psyche. And I think it hasn't been put back together so that it makes sense for us as a whole.
Yeah.
But I think in Britain, I still think even so our kids are now so assimilated, I still think it's something that's important because they're assimilated, but the country as a whole isn't necessarily working to their best interests, and that's still something that needs to be addressed. You know, black boys are still failing in schools.
Yeah.
You know, they're still less likely to get jobs.
Yeah.
They're still being stopped and searched more than anyone else. And sometimes assimilation can make you forget those things.
Yeah. And do you know what the biggest screw is for me? The biggest screw is the fact that when we enter our children into the education system, they're way above.
And
they are above, beyond. They know their shit.
Exactly.
They know what they're doing.
Exactly.
You know, they are so far advanced, and it's just knocked out of them.
And my son's 3, and he's heading for school next year, the year after. No, next year. And the thing is that's what I'm fearful of. I know how intelligent this boy is, how bright he is, just from now.
Yeah.
You know, the potential he's showing. And I'm thinking, you know, he's going to go into a school system that experience has showed they underestimate, or they don't put any expectations on our kids. So there's no expectation that they're going to do well.
Yeah.
Even if they're not mistreating them. No one's saying, you know, it doesn't have to be always about mistreating them or targeting them, but there's just no expectation placed on them. There's no, you're going to be a doctor, you're going to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
And so how they aspire to those things. But I mean, that is an issue. That is a thing of saying that, yeah, we're British, but there's things we have to do.
Yeah.
As black British people. It's
deep, you know, because I was watching a video the other day that's on YouTube, and the guy on there was saying, you know, when you give birth to your black baby and then you breastfeed and then you put the child on formula, even formulas are created, you know, against white mother's milk. You know, it's not created for right. So this is deep, you know,
absolutely.
And so if that's the case, if the formula is not actually even created for us, right, then that means that all the way along, you know, when we're in hospital, when we're pregnant with our children, the system is set against white people, you know. So if your baby is bigger because you're black, then maybe you're doing something wrong.
They're the norm, aren't they? So,
so it's all against their
absolutely.
Their scales,
exactly.
You know.
Exactly.
So it's sad, it's scary, it's weird, because we are somewhere where we're not actually supposed to be, and we don't actually have anywhere to go back to.
Exactly.
So maybe that is it. Maybe there is no such thing as black British. You know, like I was talking to a lady the other day, and you know, on those same forms under religion, it will say Christian, Muslim, or whatever, but there's nothing for spirituality. There's nothing for paganism.
I put Christian other, but that's not ideal,
right?
You know, that's not ideal at all, because there should be something for spirituality, and it's exactly the same thing. It is, because even so, as I said, there's such complexity in the Black British debate. I still want a category for Black British, because it's the closest to what I am. You know, it's the closest to what I am, and I do feel that as I said before, if someone coming from the Caribbean who came over a week ago was faced with one of those forms, they'd have a category, because it would that's Black Caribbean. So they would straight away have a category. But me and that person are not the same, and our identities aren't the same. And yet that category that they fall into quite easily is the only one available for me to tick.
And
that doesn't make any sense.
Sorry to interrupt you, but even Black Caribbean doesn't make any sense, does it? Because if that's the case, then on the same form it should say White Caribbean.
Yeah, exactly. And you have very specific. You have White Irish, you have White Scottish. You know, you don't just have White North. You know, but that's the thing. But I think the very least they can do is make it so that I know that they're thinking about me when they're creating this form, a Black British person, and that they don't just see me in terms of my heritage. You know, in other words, the British doesn't even come into it. I'm Black Caribbean or I'm Black African, so I'm only what my forefathers were in their eyes, which doesn't address what I am now, which is what my forefathers were and what I am now. Combined. Because there's a whole lot that has gone into making us. Exactly.
You know. But as this, you know, when I was talking to this lady about what religion, and she was saying pagan and whatever, I said, why do you think that is? And she said, well, we're not respected, that we basically don't exist. And I was thinking, well, that's basically what it comes down to. I think that when it comes to Black people, for our strength and for our working ability, we are necessary. Of course we're necessary. If we weren't necessary to England, right, then they wouldn't make the airfare back home so flaming expensive. They need us to be here working like dogs, like slaves, whatever, right? But we're not good enough to be rated.
And I think that's what I was going back to when I said that there's that part of me that knows I'm Black British, but when you're treated with when you're dismissed so easily and treated with such disregard, you then start to think, well, am I? Am I British when you so don't want me to be, when you can't even bother to include me on your forms? You know, but there you go.
Okay. Well, I think on that note, we should wrap up. And I think maybe we could continue this or, you know, well, we will be talking about more other things along these lines as time goes on. But we hope that you've enjoyed everything that we've said today. If you've got anything to say against us or, you know, supporting our argument, we want your point of view. So if you just put a comment in the bottom, you know, underneath the video, then it's all good. One of us will probably even respond. Okay? Well, thanks a lot. Thanks, Michelle.
You're welcome.
And let's do this again soon, all right?
We will do soon.
Cool. Toodle pip.
Bye.